Hi guys, we have a little bit different view of the old studio today because I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I am going to set an object on my desk in kind of like a little mini still life, and I'm going to paint it from life rather than painting from a photo. So that's always fun, a little bit challenging, but then I'm also going to be using gouache, and I'm also going to be using only 3 primaries plus black plus white. And so that should be an interesting little experiment. It's always fun to try to limit your palette to only the essential colors. So I thought I would just show you guys how to use the primaries. So let's do this. We interrupt this program with a trigger warning. A vegetable that is most likely an acorn squash is repeatedly referred to as a pumpkin. This has been a public service announcement. Now back to our show. All right, first off, I apologize. It is storming outside, so you're probably going to hear that in the audio, but it's Oklahoma. What are you going to do? You know, that's just the way it goes. So we've got a nice little like dark green pumpkin here that has a little bit of orange highlight on it. And we've got it set up on a pillowcase on a little box here. So that should be fun. We have our sketchbook right there. And then we have our colors over here, and that is lemon yellow, phthalo blue, cadmium free red, Payne's gray, and white. So it should be a lot of fun, or should be interesting anyway, because I don't paint in primaries all that often, and I don't paint in gouache all that often. So we will see how this goes. Here are the materials for today at a glance. They are also listed in the description for you. Okay, here's my drawing. I obviously have some bleed through from a previous project, but the beauty of gouache is that it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to take some white and some blue and some red. I'm going to make a nice like kind of light purple, but you're beginning to see right here how the whole painting with primaries thing is. It is a dance back and forth in order to get the colors that you want. So just prepare yourself for that one. If I had used different blue and red, I would have had to add yellow to this to gray it down, but since my phthalo blue already has yellow and my cadmium red already has yellow, then I didn't even have to add the yellow. How's that for a shortcut? Also, if I had not had navy bleed through from a previous project, I would not have actually had to use opaque white here. I could have just diluted the purple and used the white of the paper as the white, but since we had that bleed through, we had to use the titanium. So I'm going to start out on the background here. I'm using that light purple, and I'm just adding in the darkest areas of the shadow on this white backdrop. And for now, I'm just getting all of that color blocked in. For the lighter areas, I'm going to actually mix in some yellow to my white because it is a very, very warmly lit area. I have an incandescent bulb on my desk lamp, and so it makes it very kind of a yellowy, warm tone. So I'm just adding that into the white, and we're going to use that for the lighter areas here. I might have gotten my purple a little bit too dark initially, so I'm coming back in and kind of covering over that a little bit and lightening everything up. I may end up darkening again later, but for right now, I think it needs to be a little bit lighter. So I'm just giving that a glaze over the top of it. The cool thing about gouache, or gouache, however you want to say it, is that it is opaque, and so you can cover over mistakes. Now, to be perfectly honest with you, I've been calling this a pumpkin, but I have no idea what kind of pumpkin this is. It might even be a squash or an acorn squash. But it doesn't have that acorn shape. It's flat on the bottom like a pumpkin, and I don't know what kind it is because I just picked it up from the grocery store and I have not a clue, and I cannot find one like it that looks like it on the internet. So who knows? I do know that it didn't have a stem, so I glued one on, full disclosure. All right, I think I need a transitional color here, so I'm going to mix those two together and make an in-between color so that we can blend this in a little bit better. Now I'm using that in-between color as a mid-tone here. Another cool thing about gouache is that it reactivates. So it pretty much, as I'm putting this over the top of it, it is blending in very nicely because it's reactivating the paint that's underneath. You know, this whole pumpkin versus acorn squash thing is really just splitting hairs, to be honest with you, because every single pumpkin is a squash. Not every squash is a pumpkin though, so maybe that's where the difference comes. But I mean, does it really matter? I just wanted to paint a lovely shape. So it's got some lovely colors, it's got some lovely shapes, that's why we're painting it. If you just so happen to be a squash expert or a farmer, I actually would be interested to know what kind of vegetable or fruit this is. So you should drop it in the comments. For the orange areas on the pumpkin, it is a very, very bright orange. So we're just gonna mix some of the yellow and the red together and not even gray it down. We're just gonna leave it that nice bright orange. And y'all, I'm about to run out of this yellow. I really should have bought some more before I started this thing, but I didn't quite anticipate how much yellow I was gonna use. So I'm gonna take that orange and I'm just gonna run it along the cracks of these little separations, whatever they're called on a pumpkin separation cracks. And we're gonna put more on this right side because that's where more of the orange shows through, and then we're gonna come back in with the dark green and paint that over the top of it. While that's drying, I'm going to take the blue and the yellow and mix those together for a really nice green, really nice dark green. And then after that, we are going to need to gray that down because it is a bright green and this is a very, very subdued dark green. So we're adding in the red in order to do that. And honestly, quite a bit more red than you would think. So I'm just gonna start adding in all of this green on the left side because that's where the vast majority of the green is, or at least the largest concentration of it. And as I go along, I'm going to add in just a little bit of white on the shiny bits of the pumpkin in order to keep some of that definition so that I don't lose the drawing. And then over the orange, I am making sure that I have very little paint on my brush and I'm dry brushing over the top of that so that the orange shows through, but not all the way through. On this section, there's some cool little swirly patterns in that orange, so I'm kind of just swirling that paint along in there. And I'm just continuing to add in all that dark green, and then I'm using white as I need to highlight those specific little sections and just filling it all in. And next we have to mix some brown for the stems. So I'm starting out with the blue, then I'm going to add the red, and then, I mean, we're kind of getting close to brown, but now I think we need some yellow. Let's put some more yellow in there. Nope, more blue, we need more blue. Now we're getting kind of close to a nice lovely brown. I'm going to take that color and then mix a highlight color, so I'm adding more yellow to the lighter version and then some white, and we're going to use that for the highlights on the stem. First off, I'm just gonna take the lighter of the browns and just gonna cover the entire area. Then I'm gonna come back in with some white and add some of the highlights. Then I'm gonna use my darker color for the shadow side, which is, in this case, the left side, because the light is coming from the right. I think we need an even darker brown, so I'm going to use Payne's Gray for the first time in this painting, and I'm just going to use a tiny little bit of that and mix it into my brown, and that'll be for the darkest parts of the shadow on the stem. I'm noticing that we have some even darker areas on the dark green of the pumpkin, so I'm just going to go in with some straight Payne's Gray on the top little shadow areas on the top of each little section here. We're just going to use that, and then we're going to blend it in with a little bit of water in here in a minute. And we're going to go all along the bottom here where it meets the table, and we'll darken up the shadows on the table later, where it doesn't look quite like it's floating on top of the table, you know. Yeah, I think this left side definitely needs to be a lot darker because it is the shadow side. It's pretty dramatically lit from the right. So we're just going to go ahead and darken in this entire left side. I've lost some of my orange, especially in these little cracks, so I'm coming back in and adding that back in because I feel like that's an important part of this pumpkin. And we're just going to add a little bit in the other areas as well. This little pumpkin is a pretty shiny, glossy little guy, so we're going to add some just plain white to the pinnacle of the highlights on this each little section. Okay, now that the pumpkin is mostly done and I see how dark it is, I'm realizing we need to come back into the background and darken up some areas there for sure, because it's very much too light. It's looking like it's pasted onto a white background here, so we're going to blend it into its background a little bit more. And by doing that, we are going to ground it into its space. So I'm just going to go on a nice lovely round of darkening and blending and darkening and blending, and rather than telling you each time I do that. Okay, so we need an even darker shadow underneath this pumpkin to ground it to the table. So I've mixed some Payne's Gray into my color here, and I'm making kind of a medium tone shadow a little bit further out, and then I'm going to come back in even darker, closer to the pumpkin with more Payne's Gray, and that's just the very, very darkest shadow right underneath the pumpkin. I think we need some just plain straight white here on the highlights of the cloth because it needs to be a little lighter, and we'll just blend that in. left side is in very much shadow, but we also have a little bit of bounce back light from the white surrounding it. So I'm adding in just a tiny little bit of that and then blending it in with some water so that it doesn't overtake the shadow area. It just needs a little bit more work on the stem, I think. So we're adding in some highlights on the right side, and we're gonna make it just a little bit darker on the left side while we're here. And there's the finished product, all dried and signed and all that kind of stuff. And it was an interesting little project for me, like just using the primaries plus white and Payne's gray. I really just honestly do not do that very often, but it was a lot of fun. And there you have it, a nice little exercise in using your primaries to mix every color. It's not the easiest thing in the world, but it is definitely doable. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, all of that fun stuff, because that's how this channel gets to grow. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again in 2 weeks.